Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of LinkedIn Live video series, Breaking New Ground. Thanks for making time on a Thursday evening. For those of you who are joining in from Europe, I think special thanks to you because I understand there's a long weekend coming over. But yeah, welcome aboard. I'm Aditya Shankar, co-author of the Coronavirus Business Impact Report and a content marketing manager at MoEngage. Just to give you some numbers around the report that we brought out and why did we decide to do this LinkedIn Live in the first place itself. So a little while back, we partnered with Apptopia, one of the biggest app intelligence companies in the world, on really, to how to track, basically to track the consumer confidence trends in each of the continents. And for this, we really, we went really mega scale. We tracked some 1.5 billion users worldwide, their patterns across 5 different continents, and some 12 different B2C industry verticals. So it's just enormous, the kind of report that we made. So this particular LinkedIn Live is specific to the European Union, and we really want to discuss how it impacts businesses more in Europe and UK. So yeah, I think we have planned this as a weekly affair for all geographies. So for those of you who have, who might have questions for other geographies, stay tuned for more in the series. I think this is a weekly episode. So, but feel free to drop in your questions because this is a LinkedIn Live session. Just keep dropping your comments, viewpoints in the comment section, and we'll be happy to take it towards the end of the session. I understand we are running on a clock here. Before I introduce the other speaker on this session, I'll quickly lay out the housekeeping rules here. Number one, you can follow this conversation, anytime on hashtag Breaking New Ground, and of course, share that with your network, create some, your own insights around it. Number two, as I said, this is a live broadcast, so just keep us sending your thoughts, your questions in the comment section, and we'll quickly attend to it, towards the end of the call. It's been over a month now since most countries went into the lockdown, and yeah, I think let's really see how it has impacted Europe in particular. And with me, in today's call, we have Mike Barclay, who heads growth and operations at MoEngage. Mike, welcome on the call. How are you?
Hey, Adi, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm Mike Barclay, and I head growth for MoEngage in Europe. What that basically means is I look after everything to do with customers and people, and I'm obviously helping us spirit our efforts to grow our European business. Lately, obviously, I've been confined to London, like everybody else has been confined to their home cities, but generally I spend maybe 2 or 3 days a week in various parts of Europe, and over the last 12 months, we've added customers in the Eastern Europe itself, in Greece, in Germany, in Spain. So, I think this is really timely, and I'm really glad that we're doing it. And I'm also really pleased to see that the sample set of 30 million different users is significant enough, I'm sure, for us to have some really robust data. So, well, before we get into it, Adi, I think it might be useful if you explain to people how many industries we covered, what kind of industries, so that gives us a bit of context to this.
Sure, Mike. I think you mentioned 30 million, but the data size is much more. So it's into 300 million.
300,
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, don't be sorry about it. I think that makes it even, that just makes it, even more rich, the entire data set. And I think, to answer your questions, we covered some 12 different industry verticals, all of them predominantly into B2C. Whatever industry you name it, right? From telecom, e-commerce, edtech, BFSI, healthcare, media entertainment, travel, hospitality, video chat apps, real estate. Food delivery happens to be one of the major segments that we covered in the European Union. So yeah, so that's on the number of industries that we covered. And if I have to just quickly summarize the 2 or 3 main takeaways for our audience right here, I think that would be number one, to know where your industry lies on the COVID Impact Quadrant. Our viewers will be, soon enough seeing the COVID Impact Quadrant and what it is. I'll speak about it in detail later, and so will you, Mike, as well. The second one is more about, how campaign stories of other brands in the European Union who are engaging their customers and are still growing in times of pandemic, which is, quite peculiar, and there is a bit of learning for all of us, irrespective of the geography we are from. And the third is, much more data-driven insights. As marketers, decision makers, we tend to make decisions more based on hunches. So this report, basically will try to put things into perspective and, really let the marketers know that how important it is to make decisions based on data. So I think, yeah, those were the quick 3 takeaways. I think, Mike, let me know, should we get started with the quadrant?
Yep, I think we should. Just before we do that, just in case a few people join late, from a housekeeping perspective, any questions, put them in the chat. We'll pick them up at the end, and we will be recording this, so you will be able to get a full link towards the end anyway. So you've only missed the basic introduction, and now I think our team might be a good time to dive into the quadrant itself.
Great. So I think our viewers can now see the impact quadrant for Europe, the European Union and its totality here. So basically the X and the Y axis here, the X axis is the number of downloads. So these are more the new users, which are, still getting into the funnel. And on the Y axis, you have active users. So in terms of the quadrant itself, if I start from the rightmost, the topmost quadrant, which is the explosion quadrant, which is basically most businesses would ideally want to be, something which is high on downloads, something which is high on, even on the active users side. If we sort of come, in the anti-clock manner, the second quadrant, on towards the left is the growth quadrant, which basically means, people, high on active users, but downloads not so much. This is still a good segment to be in for industries because it really shows that businesses are retaining most of their customers and the activity is still high. The third quadrant, if we come in the same anti-clock manner, is the slowdown industry, which possibly it's a grim situation there, and as businesses we all empathize with them. So it's more got to do with how both downloads and active users have taken hit. And the last quadrant is more on the emergence side of things. Businesses who have just come onto over the horizon. For Europe, we really don't see any businesses right now because Europe has predominantly been a mobile first economy. So we really don't see some new players suddenly coming into the entire span. So that's the impact quadrant in a nutshell. Mike, what do you have any insights over here? I'm sure you must have a lot of practical on ground insights.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, I think the timing for this is spot on, right? Because giving us a real overview of the entire performance of all these different industries during COVID. And it's been quite distressing for me because, clearly with what we do, one of our key verticals is things like travel and hospitality. And we're seeing some of those partners who we work well with, having a real slowdown. We can see just from the data that we see that, the campaigns are down, the visits are down, and so on and so forth. So a real shame, as we come into summer, because that should be their boom time, and clearly they're struggling. But what's also interesting to see is that some of the movements and some of the problems are a bit of a surprise. I mean, travel and hospitality, unfortunately, not a surprise. If the government says you can't travel and you can't stay in hotels, the hotels are shut, then your business is gone. But why do you think food delivery is performing in such a different way than you might expect? Because I think everyone would expect that to be a worldwide boom, but clearly not, based on the data from March last year.
Yeah, interesting question. I think, you kind of, try to answer it itself when you say that, the data is specifically for March. And that's when, most countries across Europe went into sort of, the lockdowns and the government started coming with the policies. So from a data perspective, if I have to say, right, both download and DAU numbers have actually fallen for, and these are data points for some of the big names in the industry, right, like Deliveroo, Uber Eats, who have operations across the length and breadth of Europe. So I think not a clear downfall, but it has been erratic. And I think, overall, as I said, right, both numbers have dropped in March. Having said that, this industry is showing a good comeback in April. As we can see, already from the data point, it's still not back to its pre-COVID number, but it's coming back strong. What do you think, Mike? What's the on-ground reality there like?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, one of your comments earlier is that we tend to make a lot of decisions via instinct, and so obviously I've got anecdotal feedback, but also I've had the good fortune to do a couple of webinars recently and a couple of roundtables with some brands in these industries in Europe post this report. So I've actually got some fact base behind it, but I'll give you some sentiments that you see. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing both professionally and personally is that people are spending more time, as they are at home more often, spending more time doing things for themselves. That includes things like cooking. So when the shops were bare, one of the things that you can still see that now the supply chain is coming back is that it's hard to get certain types of flour, fresh pasta, these things. So people are cooking for themselves. And I do think back in March when the shock happened, that was a real, even more so, people really sort of battened down the hatches a little bit and just thought, right, I'm just going to stay out the public eye. I'm just not going to do anything. And I'm just going to do everything for myself. And of course, it occupies their time as well. What's been interesting, though, when I've been speaking to these other brands is that how they're dealing with it, because they've been really agile in terms of pivoting and doing other things. So take, for example, Glovo, who isn't just food delivery. They are a sort of concierge type app based out of Spain. So bear in mind that, concierge type app, the very word itself makes you think that it's probably targeting, quite a high demographic. And what they've done is make real public statements and backed it up by looking after the underprivileged, the older people. So free delivery for anybody old, free delivery for hyperlocal stores, and so on and so forth. And again, what you've seen is a recovery in their numbers by doing that. So much so that they've been picked up by COVID which I don't know if you're aware, but it's going to be like a Live Aid type thing, one of these long concerts, and they will be they will be on the headline, and they're their main supporters, and they'll be doing things like live deliveries when people make donations and stuff like that. So that's one area that you can see. The other one, for instance, in the same thing that you could say would be Just Eat in the UK, which has really publicly gone out and started raising money for the NHS, for meals for the NHS. So I think you give a £5 and it feeds an NHS person. And I think the last time I saw, they're up to about £1 million in donations. So again, reposition themselves, looking at their core value, what they can do, and then bring it to applying it to today's problems. Let's move on to the growth quadrant. Let's talk about what's happening there, what you can see. Again, I think there could be some surprises for people in the data there.
Definitely. I think, if I take an overview of the growth quadrant, most industries, we expect such names to be there. But one surprise that, will raise a lot of eyebrows here as well is the mobility industry. Because, you would expect, we have all read so many articles, all over the internet that how, the bigwigs of the industry, the Uber, the Olas, and the Lyfts of the world have actually slowed down, right? Because it's a complete lockdown in most countries right now. But it's interesting to see that we have still placed it in the growth quadrant. And the reason behind it is there is another major subsection of the mobility industry, which is actually seeing quite a boom. And, frankly, if you leave it to me, I would have actually kept that section of the industry in explosion. And that section is the micro mobility, and not just micro mobility, like the Lime, like a particular, a best example of micro mobility is Lime. But also, industries which have got more to do with rental car services, like 60. 60 has a huge base in, Germany, Italy, all these, I think, Eastern European countries. And they have seen such a huge boom when it comes to both DAU and the downloads. And, it sort of balances because the ride-hailing cabs are in the slowdown. And, on the other side, micro-mobility and rental car services are in the explosion. So we kind of, we have tried to, balance it out and kept it in the growth quadrant. What do you have to say about it, Mike? How does the on-ground reality look there?
Again, I think it's interesting. In the UK and most of Northern Europe, only essential workers are allowed to go out to work. So you're talking about food production, food delivery, NHS, care people, that sort of stuff. There's a few in the UK where you might argue non-essential, but if you absolutely cannot work from home, then again those people will be allowed out. But things like nightlife and stuff at a standstill, right? So I think what we're seeing there is that people are more inclined to travel under their own steam, right? So if you think about social distancing, how do you social distance in a cab, right? If you think about, the underground, whether it's the London Underground, whether it's the German one, whether it's the Paris Metro, all of them are famous for being crowded. So people don't want to take those forms of transport. And clearly, air change, etc. So people are worried about that. So I think people are just taking it into their own hands, right? So SITS could be having a boon because people who haven't got cars normally, because they normally use great metro transport, are wanting to have their own vehicle outside, which they know is a controlled environment. The other thing that you see is you walk around London, and you are still allowed to walk around London as long as it's for exercise only and only once a day. But the other thing you see as you walk around London is just a proliferation of things like the Lime bikes, the jump bikes, etc. So again, this is another opportunity for people to take their transport into their own hands, avoid taking, public transport, avoid buses, avoid being in close proximity in a car, and actually drive themselves. And at the same time, get some exercise, which they're allowed to do, and improve their health. So I think what we'll see is that this will be a lasting change. There will be a real acceleration of people using these types of forms of transport in the future. So that adoption will come through. And that's a big warning for the likes of the Ubers and the Olas and Lyfts of this world, because Uber, for example, for the first time in the UK, have announced that they want to cut their drivers by 4,000 rather than increase them. I mean, that is a big deal, right? These guys have always never had enough. Now they're actually cutting. So quite interesting there. Perhaps we should move on to cover other industries, because I noticed quite a lot of information, and I've also had a lot of conversations with the healthcare fitness sector. So talk to us about that, what the data is saying to you.
Definitely. I think you would definitely have much more insights in this industry. But from a data perspective, I think, I think this is one of the most exciting and one of the most promising industries in the explosion quadrant right now, the health and fitness industry, that is. I think, more and more people confined in their homes are turning to apps like Runtastic, Freeletics, to exercise at home to stay fit. And I think, that's how we are all being, right? Like, you can't just Netflix and chill all the day. You have to get off the couch and do something. So, and on the other side, even apps like which are heavy on the virtual doctor consultation, telemedicine apps like Doctor they have seen a huge explosion in terms of both active users and download numbers. Mike, again, circling back to you, I know you got into a roundtable, a webinar, a roundtable discussion with few of our clients there. What insights do you have in particular from your direct talks with them?
Sure. Just a little shameless plug. The roundtable insights are available. You can actually pick them up to have MoEngage. Got to get that one in there. So interesting. So on the healthcare piece, there's different things, right? So there's a telemedicine type thing that's behaving slightly different. And in some cases, it's doing really well. In others, it's not. When you cut underneath the surface, though, there are some whereby part of the advice was given by doctors in working part-time, right? So as a separate thing for this thing that they're doing. And clearly, if you're in the UK, for example, I know consultant surgeons have been sequestered into the front line to help with people. So some cases the supply is not there. Where it's a kind of almost AI database, those guys are doing really well. When you look at fitness, there's two sides. There's the physical fitness and the mental fitness. On the physical fitness side, 8Fit, which has been phenomenally successful before anyway, with a premium offering, I've really thought about how do they get to what users want today, right? So, you're going to be working out from home. You probably haven't got any kit. So let's do a workout that's centered on everyday objects, where you're using the chairs for your dips, if you like, whether you're using bottles of water as your weights, your resistance, or even tin cans or whatever it is, right? So giving people an opportunity to experience fitness in the home using the stuff that's available to them. And that's really has some resonance. And again, you'll see a massive uptick for those guys. Again, on the mental side, one of the brands we speak to quite often is Seven Mind. And they provided a really good freemium service where it's all about just making sure you realize you're not on your own, right? So lots of people have got their kids at home all the time. They may be trying to both work on the dining table, with children in the house, etc. And it's not they don't love their kids, it's not they don't love their partners, but that's not a normal environment for them. So what they're talking about is that could cause you stress and anxiety. This is how you can chill. This is how you can find 5 minutes even in a busy house to go and do a little meditation. And they've got a 7-day program. So again, people can experience that. And I'm sure, again, people will see the premium stuff next to it. No doubt these guys are going to do well down the line as well. The uptick they see now, I see them turning into attention. So, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks for giving us this overall flavor a little bit. And I could see, you can see from the quadrant itself that there's lots more data in there. But perhaps you might want to give us a bit of a summary as to what you see from this COVID Impact report.
Sure, Mike. I think you made some real good insights, by taking examples of healthcare industry, and fitness industry as well, how they have really been agile and, thinking on their feet and trying to come across, as empathetic brands, really trying to, changing their premium services into freemium services. So some real good points there. I think you briefly touched upon. And but if I have to, and this also happens to be, a very good time to, transition into the other section of our talk today, which is more around the strategies that brands should be doing, right? Should be employing right now, because I'm sure a lot of our viewers would also, happen to join, who happen to join today would want to know such insights. So, Mike, if I have to, ask you, just to start off with some strategies here, what would be your number one strategy? Yeah.
Well, the first thing that I'm seeing is that brands are really taking time to reevaluate how they approach marketing in general, reevaluate where their spend is. We did a webinar just yesterday about how you can use organic growth and how you can drive organic growth in this time where your marketing budget may have been reduced. And what you want to do is make sure you don't lose so many people that you become less relevant. So the reevaluation process around spend is one piece, but also the reevaluation process around messaging. So, I mean, something that's came out really loud and clear from the last two or three interactions was there's probably three core tenets to what you need to do, right? So the first core tenet is to rethink what customer centricity means to you. So it's always been possible for a long time, been important for a long time to put the customer at the center. But now what you need to do is think about what's going on in that customer's mind, because his preferences will have changed, his priorities will have changed, her things that she's concerned about on a daily basis will have changed. So they're thinking about, health, they're thinking about community, they're thinking about all these other things they've got to manage. So in that scenario, what does that mean in terms of how you actually approach those customers? What is it you say to them? So think about that. Yeah. Make sure your messaging is congruent. And I've seen people I've heard about real backlashes where people just go with the same normal message, right? But also I've seen it done well. So a fitness app, not the one we just talked about, where they've changed their ASO, their ASO pictures in their story within the app stores, where it used to be like get fit, look good, and the person was going to getting fit to go out. And now it's like get fit, now it's like stay healthy at home. So it's that type of thinking that makes a difference. So think about how your customer's thinking. The second part of it is to recognize that everything's online right now. So how do you get that oh wow moment? How do you get that cut through that resonates with the customer? So the messaging, the whole approach, not just the tone, has to be built around that. And then the last piece is, that I've seen done really well is then looking at what you've already got and how do you repurpose it. So a great example, actually, I'll give you quite a funny non-European example. Have you heard of an app called Jimmy Brings?
I think so, yeah. It's an Australian brand?
They're the ones, Australian brands. Yeah. And their core proposition was that, within 30 minutes, they can deliver whatever alcohol you want to your house, right? Now, the Australians, a bit like the Brits, on a day like today, they want to be outside, have the barbecue with their friends around, etc., right? And so you can imagine the scenario, more people turn than you expect, it goes on, and you run out of booze. So that's what their proposition was. Now, no one's doing that now. So what they did was think, well, what do people really need? And what really amused me was that within a couple of weeks, they pivoted into saying, we can deliver you essentials within 30 minutes. So, for example, toilet roll, which for a while became the new currency in the UK, right? Okay, you could exchange these for toilet roll. So they actually had the pledge where they could deliver you a toilet roll within 30 minutes. Now, there's probably quite a few of us could work out there may be times when you really want a toilet roll, you don't want to go and queue for it, and it's good that can be delivered in 30 minutes. So slightly anecdotal, a little bit of a joke, but that's it. Their core proposition was we can get you what you need within 30 minutes. So think about those essential core values that you've got and bring those to the customer.
Great points, I think. So, Mike, I think I had another, a thought into it when you were speaking about it, and that's how few brands who have actually diversified into other essential segments. I think you gave an example of. Glovo. I think Jimmy Brings, was it?
Jimmy Brings, Glovo, yeah.
Yeah. So they're all really, diversifying into other essential segments. And we saw some pretty huge names in Europe, like, Zara, Nivea, Dyson. They got into it and they started making face masks, PPE equipments and stuff. We
Yeah.
also saw, we also saw Givenchy and, Christian Dior, they started production of hand sanitizers and alcohol giants, like, big names, Absolute Vodka, British Honey Company, Brewdog,
Mhm.
actually getting down and, starting to say, okay, we'll see how we can, get into the essential segment and, still
Yep.
try to help and, be with our customers. This sort of reminds me, like how a lot of online brands have, always, been into the digital mix of sites, but now how more and more offline brands are, really pivoting.
Mhm.
And I think one of the big examples, and it also happens to be one of your favorite pubs in UK right now, which is I think Green King, if I'm not wrong.
Yep. Green
Yeah,
King. Yep.
who actually came out with the messaging that, okay, we understand you can't come to the pub, we'll bring the pub to you.
Absolutely.
And and I think that sort of messaging hits with, with your customer base. And they actually went and go ahead and, they went ahead and they said, we are going to roll this out for 500
Mhm.
outlets across the country. And they're going to introduce, contactless delivery. I
Yep.
think, I think that's something even Deliveroo started later. So I think, some
there's
really,
there's a lot of people doing that type of thing. Delivery with a contactless delivery. They put it in your porch. They take a picture. They send you a text, and you come pick it up. But also local restaurants have pivoted, and now they are turning into themselves like convenience stores, opening 1 or 2 days a week. And their loyal bases who eat there regularly, you get an email ping up and say, "Do you want to come in? And we've prepared racks of lamb this time. You can take home and cook," and all that type of thing. So yeah, an offline business recognizing that, using the power of online to still get to their customer and give them a service. It's a common thing.
great. Mike, there's one question that I had, how can brands at this time really engage their customers without looking opportunistic? I know you briefly touched upon it, but if you really want to, go ahead and answer this one.
Yeah, I mean, well, I talked to Babbel, who are the language learning app, and if there's ever a time when people probably had time to do something, and for many people, that's one of the things in the top 5 things. What would you like to do? I'd love to learn another language, right? So they've at the beginning started bombarding, really up the ante in terms of their messaging around this, and they found it actually a backlash. Is kind of, wait a minute, I'm just trying to work out how to work at home and what's going on with my kids and how my parents are going to fare because they are in a vulnerable group. And so what they did was really think about, again, using the principles we said before, what's my messaging, what are people doing, et cetera, et cetera. So they started just sending general information, updates and so on, and then allowing people to realize that they were being their friend. And they then started almost in a passive way responding well. Another good example is Oyo. So Oyo, one of the second largest hotel chain in the world, they actually have already launched in Europe. So it's not just an Asian brand, 135,000 hotels. They've held on to 98% of the daily active users, right? That's at least 30% better than any other hotel chain that I'm aware of. And the way they've done that is that they're now using the app to bring local news, local content, etc. So they're engaged in creating a community around the app. So it is, yes, engage, but think about how you engage. Make sure you do it in a non-opportunistic way. Facilitate the opportunity for your customers to be able to speak to each other, and you will then maintain your audience, which you then capitalize on down the line.
Understood. Thanks for those insights, Mike. I know we are roughly around the 30-minute mark right now, and before I open up the question answer session to the audience, if you have any questions so far, there is one question that I have in particular, and I know we have been specifically shameless about doing product plugins so far. But this is a genuine question. I'm being very honest. How really do you think brands like MoEngage can really, come into the mix and help brands in such times of pandemic?
So 2 things, and we're drinking our own Kool-Aid here. So we actually have within our outbound teams, a project where we're mailing certain sectors where we're saying you can use our engagement tool for a free period during this lockdown, and it isn't tied to you have to have a contract after. And we're seeing some response to that. So there's that element. But in general, though, there's a couple of things we're talking about. So people's thought processes have changed, their behaviors have changed. An automation service is all about understanding behaviors and watching what people are doing. and it's all about segmentation, and it's all about personalization. So firstly, segmentation is all about splitting users and thinking, okay, and so this group who were previously high propensity to do X, Y, Z because they worked in this way, now must be working that way. How do I look at that segment? So get segmentation right. Using things like RFM, so predictive analytics, to understand of the people who were in my audience, how many are drifting away, what do I do to target those people? And then the personalization thing is putting the right piece of content in front of them at the right time, which might not be an offer. It might actually be a piece of content that relates to your industry, but is sensitive about what's going on with COVID. So it's all about using the tools that can help you with that. And the other thing I would say with it, from a market automation perspective, is that a lot of people have got their teams working all over the place now. Some have got people on furlough. They might have a smaller team, but it's just as much work. So again, when you have automation, it makes it easier to get work covered.
Great point, Mike. I think you briefly wanted to also touch upon the Teams feature. How exactly does that add value to the entire thing?
That is a good point. So, you might have, a designer up in Skye, the Isle of Skye, and you might have another person over in Reading, all creating this proposal or this campaign that needs to go out. And what Teams does allow you to have discrete different groups with a authorization hierarchy. So basically, this campaign that was designed in Skye, that was populated in Reading, can be checked with someone in Ipswich before it goes out in London, and it just does that seamlessly.
Great, yeah. I think that really helps, because more and more teams are working from home, and you really don't want authorization to be a roadblock. Great points, Mike. I think that's all that I had to say. We'll quickly see if we have any questions from our audience here. I think there's one question from Pooja Gujral. She's asking, are you going to speak about the beauty industry as well at some point? Pooja, so for the report's sake, we actually did not, break down the e-commerce as a segment in its own. It's one huge segment right now, and most of the e-commerce brands have been restricted by governments across geographies to focus on the essentials first. So the beauty industry, has taken a hit. There is no point denying it. But Mike, do you have any insights from Europe in specific?
Yeah, I mean, on the positive side, it looks as though we'll follow the German and I believe the French example, where things like hairdressers and beauty salons are one of the things that are going to open again. And it seems like vanity, but there are a lot of people who are getting pretty desperate for a haircut or whatever it might be. So there's that element. But absolutely right. I mean, even in the offline world, if you walk into a Superdrug, which is a big pharmacy chain over here, or Boots, they actually have tape over the makeup bit saying, is this essentially you buy this product? So, it's one of those things where that's definitely an industry which has been hit by government policy, and it's difficult for you to see how you change that until the government policy changes.
Thank you. Pooja, I think that sort of answers your questions. If you have still more, queries around it, please feel free to, get in touch with us, and we can see what more we can give you. There's another question by Satyat Jaiswal. His question is more around ad tech and advertising in general. Do we see any impact? Mike, do you have any opening thoughts to this?
Yeah, so I don't have data on this, but I would say that the same principles apply that we've been talking about before, which is advertising still needs to take place. But I've seen some great examples. So for instance, Volvo recently put out an ad which said, for once, the safest place to be is not a Volvo, stay home. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, right? So, again, it's about questioning, how do I actually still communicate my brand without, rendering people's faces? What's the point in advertising cruises when people are not allowed to book holidays, or there's been 3 cruise ships that are quarantined? So just thinking about that, the advertising and the ad tech guys, again, it's about the program, thinking about the segmentation, thinking about the messaging, but continuing to engage in a sensitive fashion.
Yeah, agreed, totally. I feel for advertising, and like a major chunk of it has also got to do with offline ads, right? Like the billboards and such stuff, which I think will definitely take a hit. And the entire concept of omni-channel basically, integrating the offline-online experience in itself. I think that will take more prominence. What do you have to say, Mike? How much of an
I
impact will,
agree. I mean,
yeah.
when you take outdoor advertising, there's the electronic stuff which can be changed relatively easily without much human interaction. But the billboard stuff, there's a massive lag in that. So, I've got no idea about numbers. Again, we've not done the study into the figures of that. But advertising takes many forms, and some of it there's a lag, right? So the digital stuff you can change on a sixpence. But the non-digital stuff, that's a tricky area. I'm glad you've asked the question because I'm going to go and find out some more information about it and talk to some of the guys I know in advertising.
Thanks, Mike. Satya, I think that answers your question. Definitely advertising has a lot of aspects, but ad tech is definitely promising, and I think that still continues. Real estate. There's another question from Vinod. Real estate or sales are based on social interaction. So how to do it? Interesting. I think this is a brilliant question, Vinod. And before I let Mike take this one, I have an interesting insight when it comes to real estate, and I think this insight comes from a big brand in the Middle East. I think they're particularly big in Saudi Arabia. There's a brand called Bayou, and their website is bayut.com. Bayou. And you should see the level of engagement that they have done. Of course, a lot of policies around real estate, are dependent on the government, right? Because even when it comes to, like something as simple as like house rentals, or for a person to go and visit a house, you still need permissions for it, right? And a lot of such procedures in most of the countries have still not been set up, right? It's like in India, I'm sure it's a complete freeze. You can't get out, leave aside even visiting a house right now, or house hunting in itself. But Bayou, I think, in collaboration with the government, has come up with very real, clear-cut rules, and that's just one part of it, right? The other thing that they are really doing good is their marketing campaigns. They have been so brilliant. I think the kind of content that they have put out, they were one of the first brands which actually started doing webinars in Middle East. Webinars for a real estate company is completely unheard of, right? We just feel, just close the deals, just meet your bottom line, and that's about it, right? But it's really interesting to see, the kind of content that Bayou has, come up with. And it sort of, ties back to whatever we have been talking throughout this entire last 30 minutes, is how, brands really have opportunity to look empathetic and, connect with their customers, keep the activity going. You can always meet your sales, once things become, much more cohesive. Mike, your thoughts on it? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good stuff. I mean, again, mine's fairly anecdotal stuff. One of the things I was talking to Urban Spaces, who are a specialist agency in London. And so they're actually seeing quite a lot of traffic to their website. So we've got more time to look around than they used to have, right? Nice. So the traffic's good. And then, of course, the virtual tours are good. But one thing that they've told me is people are asking much more intelligent questions. Because when you go and see a house, it can be the emotion, right? The curb appeal, it looks great, it's in the right place, etc. And you go in, you sell it to yourself. People ask much more intelligent questions. So, make sure you've got your data. Again, make sure you've got the right information and the right data to respond to them.
Definitely. I think that's a question which even the hospitality industry has to answer a lot. The OEOs of the world. You gave an example of OEO. And OEO sort of, comes in that intersection of real estate and hospitality, because OEO so I think, it's a particularly good example of OEO, how OEO has still managed to, retain 98% of their active users, which in itself is a good feat of achievement. So absolutely. I think, that sort of answers your question. It's not all grim in real estate. We have seen, few brands really going ahead and, still growing, and, if not growing, at least, maintaining the same levels. So that's about it.
Cool.
So no more questions so far, Mike. I think we have almost reached the 40-minute mark. Some great questions here. I think we really liked your insights, the entire on-ground reality from you. I think, and for our viewers here, I hope we did justice to your 30-40 minutes that you spent here with us. Once this entire thing gets over, we'll be sending you the entire video recording if you want to keep it for your safekeeping. I think, that's about it from my side. Stay home, stay strong. What do you have to say, Mike? Any closing?
Exactly the same. Thanks everybody gave up the time to hit this today. but also thanks to you guys for doing a great piece of research. I can see a lot of traction with it. Lots of people are interested in it. So yeah, stay home, stay safe, and enjoy your weekends.
Thanks, Mike. Have a nice long weekend.
Yes, thanks. Bye. Bye.